Hello and welcome to the Business of Story, the show dedicated to helping you excel through the stories you tell. I'm Park Howell and I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the power of story to leaders around the world. And I am here for you and your teams through virtual and in-person Business of Story masterclasses and mastery courses. Check them all out at businessofstory.com. And now, let's get on with the show. Today, we're going to mine the old connection gap so that you can connect with your audience on a primal, emotional level to excite them to action. But how do you place your prospect at the center of your story? You're told to do that all the time, but how do you actually do it? How do you attentively listen to the wants and needs of your buyer so you can deliver the solution to the problem that they're really looking for? How do you clarify your sales story so succinctly that your customer can't help but get it? And how do you bridge that gaping chasm between marketing hyperbole and the sales stories you need on the streets?
What is that tool that makes things really easy? That structure of the and button, therefore, again, puts a focus right back where our marketing team wants as well, which is on the customer. It's where sales wants it as well, right on the customer. Tees up where they are, highlights what the problem is that they're looking to overcome, and it gives us a path to a solution that all of us in the company want. And I think what marketing craves most is that feedback from a customer, right? And so the disservice that sales teams can do sometimes is to keep that information to ourselves. And this ABT, in fact, I've seen used really effectively as a tool back to marketing to explain how the product and the service and solution has impacted a customer to tighten up the message that marketing wants to put out there. So when we can get into that, that becomes a really harmonious relationship between sales and marketing. It removes the friction and it allows all of us to create a common language, singing the same song, so to speak. And that's a really powerful place to be.
Mark Smyth is an entrepreneurial sales performance coach, strategist, and problem solver who has turned his 20-plus years of experience in the proverbial sales trenches into his passion for building high-growth sales teams and developing high-performing sales professionals. Energized by possibility and grounded by his Midwest roots, Mark believes simplicity, clarity, and meaningful connection are the keys to solving today's most complex sales challenges and bridging the gap from where clients are to where they want to be. His bridge of choice? Well, you know it, the proven transformational power of storytelling, starting with the ABT, the and, but, and therefore narrative framework. That's what we're going to be covering today with Mark. And Mark knows sales. I mean, from carrying a bag as a rep on the front lines of companies like the Chicago Tribune and Career Builder, to leading fast-growing sales and sales engineering teams at Built-In Chicago and Upwork, to delivering sales performance coaching and consulting for companies both big and small. When he's not geeking out about sales and storytelling, Mark can be found with his wife and 3 young, energetic, and frequently grass-stained children in the suburbs of Chicago. Outside of work and family life, Mark enjoys the very occasional round of golf, running, hack photography, mostly of his moving target kids, and attempting to be handy at home. But the place that I know where Mark is handy is helping you use the and, but, and therefore narrative framework in your sales. And that's what he and I are going to cover today to help you close the gaps throughout all of your selling. Now, welcome to the Business of Story, my good buddy and colleague, Mark Smyth. Mark, my friend, welcome to the show.
Hey, Park, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's really, really awesome to have you here finally. You and I, got acquainted about 1.5 years ago. You had reached out, had been following some of the work we've been doing at Business of Story, plus you have been following a lot of story trainers out there, the Don Millers of the world and whatever. And you and I started chatting when you were working at Upwork back in June of 2019. And you had some questions about storytelling, and we continued that conversation to a point of, hey, man, are you interested in doing more of this training for your own people in the story world? And so you and I have kind of joined forces to be able to do that out there. And welcome to the show, finally. I'm really eager to explore your sales background and how you use the and, but, and therefore, and some other story frameworks, but really focused on the ABT today in your world. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And I would say you're very kind in the fact that you describe it as me just reaching out. I think it was more stalking. I think it was me trying to really pull together. I've had 20 years of sales experience and have had plenty of ups and downs and highs and lows. And it got to a point in my career when I was leading teams and in front of clients, coaching and consulting, and just looking for that. I don't know if you call it an it factor or something that really separates those who are always on stage, always making trip, always making the most money from those that aren't. And over time, I started to realize this power of story. I started interviewing people that were doing all of those things, and the common denominator for all of them was that they were not only great communicators, but they were great connectors. And whether they called themselves great storytellers or not, that's truly what they were. So yes, I started reaching out and seeking those that were in the space, especially in the business world, that were doing this and doing it well. And I stumbled upon you and found it to be the most simple, but the most elegant of the models out there, a tool, and particularly the ABT, which we can get into later more, that could literally sit on top of any sales process or structure that I'd been learning and changing year after year. So yes, I reached out, but I consider it more stalking. And you were kind enough to accept my call. We got acquainted, and here we are. We're having a lot of fun together, helping people to figure out how to use story and story dynamics to connect easier and convert faster. So great to be here for sure.
Well, and today we're going to talk about how people actually make sales harder than they really need to be. And it all begins with that connection gap. And I found that with storytelling, the beautiful thing about storytelling is it helps you mind the gap, close the gap. You open story loops, you invite a prospect or buyer into that loop, you create some tension in that story loop to really get them to lean into their curiosity, and their cause and effect brain says, okay, what's the answer to this? Well, of course, the answer to this is the product or service that you have to sell. And you close that story loop. And that's all about closing that connection gap. And that's what we are going to cover today. You've taught me a lot about that in the last year in all of our different conversations, because I am not from the sales world in the same formal way that you are. I mean, I've been in the advertising, branding, marketing world for 35 plus years. So yes, I've been in sales, but in a different way. Not that door-to-door, not that pick up that phone, not that virtual connection that you have worked so tirelessly in. Can you give our listeners a little bit of your backstory, and then let's jump into everything you've learned throughout your career and how you are now overlaying this story, the and button, therefore, in particular, to help close that gap and make sales easier for everyone.
We often make sales way harder than it needs to be. And I've certainly fell victim to that many times over my career, and have struggled and strive to get through that and finding models that can help us simplify things. I started my career 20 years ago. I entered this crazy world of sales, kind of unknowing what I wanted to do post-college. I was a marketing major and just trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I kind of fell onto this company. I'm born and raised in Cincinnati, and fell on this company, a young, exciting third-party logistics company based out of Chicago. And it seemed like a great place to sink my teeth into it, and very much like boiler room and exciting, and a good proving ground. But I don't think it was until I got into my career, a 10-year span at Career Builder right after there, where I'd received tremendous amounts of training, had been thrown into the trenches with all kinds of clients at all different sizes and volumes, and both from a direct contributor role, carrying a bag, and then into a leadership role. And I took that experience into other roles at different companies, both as a leader, not just of sales teams, but of solution architect and sales engineering teams. And one thing that was constantly on top of my mind, or at the top of my mind, is we are absolutely making this too difficult for our clients to buy. We talk a lot about in the past of the challenges in sales of just finding great people. We talk about things like the skills gap. We talk about things like the talent gap. When we're trying to leverage the internet, it was the information gap. I think if anything, this past year has taught us, how do we take this accelerated, what people are calling digital transformation, and make sense of it all. It's a tremendously confusing world we live in. It's complex, and in the world of sales, it can get in our way if we're not prepared to simplify it and create clarity out of the madness. And I think that that's where this idea of the connection gap has really become front and center for many, many businesses. This idea of, we live in this place where prior to the pandemic, it would be easy to grab a lunch with a prospect, or take them to dinner, or hit them up for a round of golf. It was that 3D space we all lived in. We could see what's going on around us and really plus press the flesh, if you will, of what's going on. We now live in this world, which is in many ways a great thing, right? We live in this box world where you and I are looking at each other, where we're trying to connect in a 1D or 2D world. That's tough. It's tough to really resonate and connect, whether you're trying to inspire your team as a sales leader, you're trying to inspire your customer as a sales rep to take an action. Doing so in this world is proven to be really difficult. And so that's what's made me really passionate about what we're doing together, because I think for me, there's been no greater tool to get over this connection gap than story, and particularly the simplicity of the ABT.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Mark, because as you know, my background, I started studying story now, back 2004. I was using it certainly intuitively prior to that throughout my life, my career, but I really became intentional about it when I started studying in 2004, and I dove into everything, the hero's journey, Blake Snyder's book. I mean, you name it, I read it. I started, crafted my story cycle system, the 10-step, which I've used to great effect for branding, but it's still complex. And you read the book, Brand Bewitchery. As I was doing my research on that, then I found the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact and realized that, you know what? Salespeople and marketers don't need to understand this big hero's journey thing. We need to just be able to tell these sharp, punctuated stories in under a minute to be able to have that kind of impact. And so I'm able to find these 5 primal elements, which do follow. It's a slimmed down version of the hero's journey, but you don't have to be a story theorist to apply it. And then, of course, that led me to the and button, therefore, which I learned from Dr. Randy Olson. And we've got our new book out, The Narrative Gym for Business, which is nothing but the and button, therefore. And like you said earlier, it's really where all great sales and marketing stories begin, is to understand this ABT. You found it and you started training it to others out there. I mean, I think our very first call was you were asking, is it cool if I go out and train this to some folks in Chicago? And I said, absolutely. Yep. We didn't invent it. It's been around since the beginning of time. We've just kind of revealed it. But what was it about the ABT, the and button, therefore, that you found from a sales perspective that really helped you start closing that connection gap?
Well, I think it goes back to when I was leading a technology sales team for a technology company here in Chicago. We had a great product. We had a young team that was growing quickly. It was a young business. I think I was employee 29 at the time, and I was leading this team of young reps who were coming from all different backgrounds, and we were growing quickly. We grew the team. We grew revenue. At the end of the day, we weren't growing fast enough. And it was hard for me at the time. I'd brought all the ammo I had from all the different training I had in my background to the table, yet it still wasn't enough.
So, Mark, what was the problem? Why weren't you guys expediting sales the way you wanted to?
Well, again, we were communicating as much as we possibly could, but we just weren't connecting at a level that made a difference. And I think if we could look at it closely, it's purely the fact that we were centered on ourselves. We put ourselves at the center of that story. We were super excited about what we were selling. And as a result, that's all we talked about. And we led with that. We led with our facts and figures and numbers. And I think we ended up boring people to the brink of breakup in doing so. And one of the things that I actually saw a great post the other day from Josh Braun. He's a thought leader in the space. He runs a great podcast as well called Inside Selling. This really came to life, and it resonates with this experience I had at the tech company. He had a post, and it was simply of him taking a selfie, and in the background was a family at the shoreline of a beach, and they were out there fishing. And he was struck not by how many fish they were catching. In fact, I'm pretty sure he said that they didn't catch any, but he's struck by the joy that they had in doing so and in casting the line. And I think in sales, we're often so focused on the outcome, right? We're so focused on closing the deal, making the sale. And when we don't, it's incredibly stressful. We tell ourselves all kinds of crazy stories. We feel rejected and dejected. And sometimes to overcome that, we just throw more stats, more facts, more figures out there and do the exact opposite of what we want to do. And we ended up not connecting. The term ghosting came up more than once. The term that we all hate to have was people not getting back to us. Well, of course they didn't. We were talking our world, our language, our story, instead of getting involved in our customers. And I think from there, that's really what got me involved in the story, to say, this is the thing that I believe can get us out of this hump, this thing, the ability to really put ourselves as the heroes in the story and invite them into ours as a result of what they want to focus on. I came to understand, like everyone tells us, but you often forget, the more that we can focus on where they are and where they want to be, the more likely we are to connect and to resonate.
So what was it about the ABT that you felt like this was the tool to help you overcome that? Because as you and I have talked, we can overlay these story structures and the ABT structure over any single selling architecture. Whether you're a challenger brand or
Right.
all the different names, the Miller Hyman program, I mean, all of that, they're really great. They're really important. Yet, how do you communicate them? And that's what we do. So, what is it about the ABT then that you started using it to get your people to start focusing on the customer as the hero and not the brand?
Yeah, definitely. I think any team, and certainly that was the case then, no one wants another process. No one wants another, strategy or binder on the shelf that they got to comb through and refer back to. It just adds to the complexity, an unnecessary complexity that we put on ourselves in the sales space. What they want is simplicity. This, for me, the and button, therefore, just follow that pattern of setup, problem, resolution. And the more I realized that sales is merely the same exact thing as story, and that we're literally just problem solving agents in our clients' lives, right? Sales is nothing more than solving problems in our customer's story. The ABT was that structure, as you said, Park. It's the ability to layer on top of any sales methodology that we have to really just walk people through, where are you today? What is it that you want? And why is that so important? That's the whole setup piece. And then what are you facing? What's that monster ahead of you? What's that hill you're trying to climb in the problem statement? And then where do you want to go, right? What is that resolution you're seeking to have? And how can I help you get there? And again, it takes all that pressure off of us. What it does is it put the customer at the center of the story. And then in gaining that information, it tees up our opportunity to finally sell. That thing that we're so hungry to do, it just flips the script. Instead of leading with the sale, we lead with our customer using the ABT and then tee up a natural conversation as a point of resolution via our product or service or whatever it is that we're bringing to market.
And the ABT, for those of you new to it, but therefore that first statement is a statement of agreement. And one of the easiest ways to put that together is just think of your audience. What do they want? And why is it important to them? That's your statement of agreement. And all you're doing is validating your customer, your buyer, your prospect, saying, I get it. This is what you want. And here's why it's important to you. But here's the problem. Here's why you don't currently have it. Therefore, I am here with a solution to show you how we can help you get it faster. We are more relevant. There's an urgency to our offering and why we are your go-to group to be able to buy that from. It's and button, therefore. It's that simple. But so many times, Mark, do you get pushback from people that said, dude, it's too simple. It can't possibly work?
100%. And I was actually one of those people that I said, dude, this cannot work. This can't be this powerful, right? So how has Park established such a successful business using this ABT? Because it is such a simple structure. I'm so used to 7 steps, 10 steps, 12, whatever it may be, that it can't possibly be done in 3. That is until you get into it and you try to do it yourself and you realize that not only is it difficult, but it is the most powerful exercise you can go through to get to the point of clarity and simplicity. And that's exactly what it does with your ABT. You talk about this a lot. I've been a listener for a long time, but you talk about the importance of having a singular narrative. We as reps may solve thousands of problems for a customer, but they're focused on primarily one issue at a time. And we need to have that singular narrative that mirrors and matches what the customer is looking to solve. The ABT is that thing that allows you to get really crystal clear on what it is that you bring to market, why the customer should care, and how to get them leaning in to the conversation. And this, even if it's a 2D world, they start to get excited about it. And we'll talk a little bit later in how to use this as a listening tool. But from a communication tool, there is no greater opportunity to get clear and focused than with the ABT.
Well, when you think about it, you're right. We live in a 1, 2, and 3D world. It's ideal if we can be sitting right across from our buyer or prospect because our brain and our senses can really read the room, read the body language, read the facial expressions, and it's so much more powerful. Those start to get diminished when we jump on Zoom, squadcast like we are here. Our voices get compressed and our brains on the receiving end start losing some of that nuance. So this connection gap really starts growing. And yet our brain, when it is trying to digest a message, it is 1D. It is one-dimensional. It wants a singular narrative to focus on a singular problem with a singular solution. To your point, even though your solution may offer, address many problems, begin with one. What's the most pressing for your audience, for your prospect? And that's, we're going to talk about the ABT now as a listening tool. And that's one of the most beautiful ways to use it when you are first meeting someone and you're in discovery and you're learning about them. You let them share all of their problems with you, and you filter it through this and, but, and therefore mechanism so that you can easily articulate back to them what you heard. So Mark, after 10 minutes of telling me all of your problems, I'm able to go, oh, okay, interesting. So what you and your group want is this, and it's super important because of this, but you don't have it because of this. Therefore, I think we have an offering here that can do this for you. And then 3 crazy things happen. First, they go, thank you. You actually listened to me because you said that better than I did. Number 2, I think your offering is right. Or number 3, you were so clear with that, I realized I forgot to tell you one other thing. And it's always that one other thing that is the real problem that's haunting them. So let's jump in a little bit more. And how have you used it and some of the experience in using the ABT first as a listening device so that you can place your audience at the center of that story?
Sure. I was recall back to my early days in sales, and even today, everyone's always asking or encouraging you to listen more than you speak. Your teachers and your parents and your sales instructors have all said you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Yet what I found is no one really tells you how to listen. What are we listening for? In a sales capacity, we often listen so that we can ask great questions, quote unquote, impact questions. And we need to have those right questions. But if we don't know how to listen and in what order to listen to things for, it's really tough to ask the right questions in the right way that allow us to open up this story loop, right? A story loop is nothing more than that setup problem resolution as you walk through, and you just discussed. It is a massive opportunity to validate our customer and our prospect and to let them know that they are truly being heard. When we can ask great questions, and as you said, repeat it back in a way that our limbic brains want to hear and our ego-minded selves want to hear too, we want to feel heard, especially in this very distant world that we live in. When we can repeat back in a really clear and succinct way, oftentimes more succinctly than our clients can even express themselves, it encourages them to share even more. The other point you've made too is to go, basically go in another layer deep. There's a great book Michael Stanier wrote years ago called The Coaching Habit. And it talks about just the power of staying curious for just a little bit longer. And that ABT is a great tool to do that. It allows us to stay curious. It allows us to ask wonderful questions, simple things like he suggested, like, and what else? If you leverage the power of story, you can go back and say, take me back to one of those moments where that problem really surfaced itself. Who was there? When was that? We get into those 5 primal elements of story, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but it just learning these mechanisms allows you to process it in a way that when it's heard back, it's clear as day. It allows you to get into that next section of perhaps your presentation in a much more colorful and effective way.
Well, and it uses the 3 forces of storytelling, which are agreement. We're setting the stage, getting people nodding, saying, yes, that's right. This is the ordinary world we're living in. It has then contradiction, basically act 2. Oh my God, you want this, but here's the problem that we've got to all get through. And then you have the consequence of that problem. And our cause and effect limbic system brain loves this. We are pattern-seeking, pattern recognition machines. I mean, that's what AI is all based on, is basically trying to copy what our brain automatically does, and that is pattern recognition. And what do we do when the pattern is broken or there's a change in pattern, and what do we do next? The ABT, to me anyways, is a pattern recognition tool for narrative and for messaging. And it's really about simplifying it so that you can have a bigger impact. Do you have an example, Mark, for us where you have used the ABT and it's kind of even surprised you with the impact it had on your audience?
Well, I think it's a recent one as it relates to listening in particular, which I think is one of the greatest tools you can have in a sales capacity. I was given the opportunity to work with a client, and they had recently rolled out a new sales narrative for their business. And they had they've got a great talk track now, and it's very relevant. It's very, clear on what's going on in the world today. And they had a fun contest for all the reps to share what this new talk track with their clients. And they recorded the calls and sent the top finalists to me to review and just to put my head around it. And I was very impressed by the talk track. And I think the only thing that was missing was just space to listen. It's a trap I've fallen into many, many times before in the past, and, got myself into some sales trouble by not listening. But, one of the examples of that is they were encouraged to, throughout the presentation, to ask questions or to, at a certain point to stop and say, hey, so what do you think about this? Or I've just thrown a bunch of stats at you. Which one of these is most relevant? And these are great questions, right? It could really open up a dialogue. The client would then share, and sometimes share for a couple minutes of the information that was really important to them and why it was important. And then instead of really digging in, really listening and being curious a little bit longer, we'd hear responses like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's cool. And then we would move on into what was next. It was merely a vehicle just to get into that next slide, right? Instead of saying, wow, that is really interesting. Was there a particular moment that comes up that's really, kind of expands upon this? Who else was there?
And what you're talking about there, Mark, it's so interesting, is this problem that so many of us in the business world, all of us have at some point or other, is anding our audiences to death. We never get out of exposition. So in that example right there, here you've got a salesperson listening, but they don't take advantage of the conflict or the contradiction that came up that their customer just told them to go somewhere new and interesting and novel and explore that with them. They're like, okay, thanks, that's cool. And let me tell you about this. And then you listen. Okay, that's cool. And let's go into that. So they're really missing the juice of that conversation to do a couple different things. Is number one, to learn. First and foremost, to learn. But number two, start using this bit of this magic trick of the and button, therefore, in that scenario, and take your audience on a bit of a plot turn, your buyer there, and go and explore that contradiction and then bring them back, and they will love you for it. They won't even know what you're doing to them, but they're going to go, that is really cool, as long as you're thinking with the ABT. And that's what it does, is it builds this narrative intuition so that you can experience that. And you can really make that experience happen for your buyers and prospects sitting across from you.
That's right. I think the better we can get at that, the more it becomes just an exchange of stories. You think about what we do in our personal lives. We go to a party, or we're at a dinner with friends and family. The person at the table that is sitting there listening to your story and can only repeat back, oh, that's interesting, and then they get into more about themselves, or the person you don't want to sit next to next time, right? And so why do we do that in business? I think we get so nervous at times and just, so focused on what we're doing that we just need to take more time to pause, to listen, and to really engage in those details that matter. They matter to the customer. And I think what you'll find is that, the more that we can engage, the more they open up next time. Right? The more they're encouraged to keep sharing because they're feeling heard. It's when we skip the point of validation that they say, they're not really listening anyway. Why? I'm just going to go through the motions here and get through this call. And that's terrible.
You're so right. Another gap that we experience, and you see all the time, and I certainly saw it from the advertising marketing side, is this connection gap between marketing and sales. Marketing gets caught up in the hyperbole about the brand. They're usually completely chest pounding. And sales is like, dude, I need a story. I need something more to really be able to go and connect with the audience. And I've seen this time and time again, working with Kinedyne, working with Sharp Electronics, with Dell Computers, where we're able to take a landing page and rewrite it as an ABT. And you always get everybody in the room, including the salespeople, going, yeah, that's what we're trying to say out there. So can you talk a little bit about that? You're coming from the sales side, and there's always been this gap, and still is, between our two worlds, and how the ABT helps bridge that.
You know what's interesting about that, and I agree with you. I think every company I've been a part of, there's always been a little bit of a divide between marketing and sales. What's interesting about it is we're all trying to approach the customer in the same way. We're trying to understand their needs and wants and approach them in a way that is compelling enough to choose us over someone else, right? I think the challenge and the gap there, that connection gap, is translating polish into practical. The way that marketing speaks and the way that they put their information out on a website or into communication doesn't always flow in a natural, human connection like we're having right now. So it's being able to take that marketing speak, that polish, and turn it into something that is really effective and useful. And again, I go back to what is that tool that makes things really easy? That structure of the and button, therefore, again, puts the focus right back where our marketing team wants as well, which is on the customer. It's where sales wants it as well, right on the customer. Tees up where they are, highlights what the problem is that they're looking to overcome, and it gives us a path to a solution that all of us in the company want. And I think what marketing craves most is that feedback from a customer, right? And so the disservice that sales teams can do sometimes is to keep that information to ourselves. And this ABT, in fact, I've seen used really effectively as a tool back to marketing to explain how the product and the service and solution has impacted a customer to tighten up the message that marketing wants to put out there. So when we can get into that, that becomes a really harmonious relationship between sales and marketing. It removes the friction, and it allows all of us to create a common language, right? We're speaking the same language. We're sharing the same, singing the same song, so to speak. And that's a really powerful place to be.
Yeah, I hear that all the time too. And it's kind of first when it started coming out, we need this common language, Park. We need this common way to tell the story. I was sort of surprised when it first popped up about a year and a half, 2 years ago. That's when clients, started asking me, and I'm talking like clients I worked with the Home Depot, like I mentioned, Dell, Banner Healthcare, the Army, the U.S. Air Force. I mean, very large brands, and to a group. They were Southern Nuclear is another one, working with nuclear engineers down in Alabama. To a group, they were saying, we need this common language around how we talk about what we do. And the ABT, I found, is what really brings that together. So we've talked about this closing of the connection gap. I want to close our great conversation here today is, where do you see using the ABT? There's all kinds of use cases for it. Where do you see them, the ABT, to be the most prominent and successful in business, in sales storytelling?
This may not be the answer that you're seeking out there, but it can literally be used throughout that sales process, right? And I think it just starts with that simple prospecting email. There's been times where in the past I've spent an hour trying to get my thoughts together for simple prospecting email. What am I going to say? I've got one chance to connect, and I'm reaching out to the CXO, and what are they going to think? The ABT is a really great way to take and remove all of that stress out of the process and just get clear. Executives do not have the time for a paragraph of information that we may get to later. They want clear, they want concise and to the point. More importantly, they want to know how it relates to them and their world. So start with a prospecting email and then carry it through your process. That first discovery call, make it about the customer, right?
You talked earlier about ghosting, and I have found that the ABT is like a ghostbuster. It helps you break through, and I've heard this from several of our clients anecdotally. Said, I've been ghosted for 4 months, and then I tried the ABT, and the next thing I know, I got a meeting set up. Another lady I was talking to yesterday who sells for Medela, a healthcare company out of your neck of the woods in Chicago, said, I wrote this email, and I got 6 immediate responses to it. And I said, so you're just happy to get responses? She goes, yes, in this day and age. And then I took the same ABT and I put it into a LinkedIn post. And to date, it's my most engaged LinkedIn post of all time. And I'm like, there you go. So there's two use cases. And anecdotally speaking, the stuff works.
It does work. And again, we've talked about it, but simplicity, especially in today's crazy, confusing, complex world, is so much better than complex. I'll share one other place I think is really helpful to use the ABT, and that's in objection handling. When we're negotiating and trying to handle objections, at that point of, potential stress, when we can at times, if we're not prepared for it, fall on our heels. This is that tool that allows your shoulders to fall and relax and gives you a place and a space to listen and to empathize with the customer, where they're coming from, and repeat back to them, just like we did when we were in the listening mode, right? To repeat back. So if I heard you correctly, this is where you are today. This is what you want to achieve, but what's in your way is X, Y, Z. And as a result, you either have the opportunity to achieve A, or if you don't, you're going to result in B. Did I hear that correctly? And if they say no, then you go right back to the top of that. Well, then help me clarify. Tell me more. And it's just a great rapport builder, objection handler. And it just, for me, when I've used it in that capacity, it just allows me to relax into the conversation and be on the same side of the table, so to speak, as the person that's lobbing some tough ones my way.
Well, we've talked about it too for landing pages. The ABT is just brilliant for a homepage, for a landing page, because it sets up the whole problem solution dynamic that your visitor is going to experience on your website. From my world, in the advertising, marketing, branding world, it is brilliant for brand development. I am working with a tech company over in Auckland, New Zealand right now. They are very prominent. They've got a great business going, but they've got a couple silos that they're dealing with internally, and they realize they've got more competition and haven't really succinctly define their brand story. So I'm working with their salespeople on doing this, and we are taking them through the ABT process, teaching them how to do the ABT so they can use it for all their messaging. But in that process, I'm using it as a discovery tool because they're sharing their ABTs with me about their products and services, and we are ultimately going to get to an overarching ABT for the brand, and it's all being co-created through their sales and marketing people. So we are bringing these two groups together. They're going to co-create the brand story right now, and they're learning this tool to use in all their other marketing. It's brilliant to launch into a presentation. You know, some of these sales presentations get pretty long and laborious, and they don't have to be. You can begin it with an ABT to get that singular focus, that singular narrative down, and then you might have 2 or 3 support points going through that enable you to be able to share other aspects of your solution. Every time you introduce one of those, you use an ABT to set it up, and then you share it. So some of the ways we use it in the marketing, branding, advertising side of life.
100%. I think if you look at connection, all those points that we just made, it always starts with clarity. Using the ABT in a tool like that gives us a tremendous amount of clarity that does many things for us throughout the sales process, not just for us, but also for the client. It breeds confidence. It allows us to pick up the phone or hop on a Zoom call because we are really clear on not just what we make, but what we make happen, a phrase you often use, right? And it's that confidence in knowing that allows us to sit, in front of a customer and really, really take the time to make an impact. For them, it does a wonderful trick of conviction. They're sitting there the whole time trying to judge you. Do I trust them? Do I believe in what they can do for me? That clarity that you've just given them to bridge the gap from where they are to where they want to be is an awesome conviction tool. That's the thing that translates into action. And that is 100% what we're aiming to do from the very beginning, right? Is to connect with our audiences easier and convert to action.
Yeah, my good buddy Greg Head, who has been in the sales marketing world for tech companies for as long as I have, an awfully long time, and he's grown some very, very large companies. He calls the ABT, and it's his favorite tool as well. He goes, it's an installation device. It's where I can take a complex message or story, boil it down to an ABT, and when I share that, I am installing what I want my audience to know right into their subconscious limbic system. And he has some really marvelous presentations that he's created and shared with me. They're just nested ABTs. He begins with the overarching one, and then boom, every point there's a new ABT to hook them, to get them leaning in that much more. And so I think you're right. It's just a great way to build confidence around your offering because you're so crystal clear in how you talk about it. And then it's that installation device to be able to instill that confidence and that belief and that know-how into your customer in a very quick and simple way.
100%. Yeah, I'll share one last story with your audience, and just if it comes to mind, because this is a painful one that I constantly remind me of, and it was along the lines of clarity and simplicity. Things that now people are craving simplicity, right? But nothing's really changed since the beginning of time. We always crave simplicity. It helps our brains think, right? This is probably 2013. I was working at Career Builder and handling one of the company's top 3 accounts at the time, working with the SVP of marketing. Brilliant guy. Been a part of a client for us for a long time, but always well known as being very difficult. Difficult in the way that he pushed not just me being the rep he was working with, but all the way up to the CEO to be better, to do better, to serve them better. And he was the guy that, I would break into these cold sweats every time he would get a call from him. I'm sitting at his conference room table outside of San Francisco at the end of the year, getting ready for their big renewal conversation, fully prepared, or at least so I thought I was, with all kinds of data, facts, and figures, performance stats, all the wonderful chest-pounding things that we had done for them. And went through this whole bit, kind of ready for him to say, yes, let's sign up. Absolutely, this makes sense. Instead, he gives this pause, but it was more of one of those unbelievably awkward pregnant pauses. And I'm just waiting for it. I know it's coming. And he says to me, blank face, straight face, this makes absolutely no sense. This has nothing to do with us, where we're looking to go next year. This is all about you and trying to, raise your rates. And I just fumbled. I tried to come back with even more stats and facts and figures. And he says, enough. Thank God my boss at the time was sitting there allowing me to sweat my tail off and burn through my suit coat. But he saved the day. And the way he did it was literally said, look, what he's trying to communicate here is, and then he went into a story of like, look, customer, this is where you are. This is where you want to be. This is how we can make it happen. And that sticks with me to this day. This was 2013. I will never forget that moment. And now understanding the power of story, that man is a tool I wish I would have had in my arsenal at the time. So hopefully someone listening, can resonate with that and start to say, hey, before I get into that situation, let me think about that story that the customer wants to hear.
It's a great example of we will never sell with our opinions and our assertions and our data, charts, graphs, and numbers. It's got to be put in the context of an emotional story that you can get your audience to nod to and say, yes, that's me. Yes, that's what I want. Absolutely. That's the problem I'm trying to solve here. Oh, you can do that for me.
That's right.
It's the hero's journey boiled down. You are the mentor or guide to their hero, to their prospect. Just like you said at the very beginning, they are the protagonist. They are the hero of the journey. Mark, thank you so much for being here. Where can people learn more about you and connect with you online and other places?
Absolutely. Park, thank you for having me. This has been a blast. People can reach out to me at Mark@Business of Story. That's Mark with a K, M-A-R-K at the Business of Story, or Mark at Business of Story, excuse me. And then find me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect with anyone. It's M-A-R-K and it's Smyth with a Y, S-M-Y-T-H. So thank you again for having me.
I was calling him Smyth, Smyth for a long time because I worked with a brilliant account executive by the last name of S-M-Y-T-H. I think she had an E on the end of it, though. But you're a Smith, and it's so great to have you aboard here and working together on the Business of Story. Mark has been really, really invaluable to me in understanding the sales world even that much more, coming from my marketing background. So he and I are the 1-2 punch to help you bring the ABT into your teams and teach your sales and marketing folks how to use this really powerful little dynamo. If I can be of additional service to you, come on over to the Business of Story. If you know someone who you think could really benefit from this ABT, share this episode with them. Tell them also about our very quick online course in 18 minutes through 3 short videos with me. I can take you and your team through the and button, therefore, those 3 forces of story, of agreement, contradiction, and consequence. I've also got a new book out with my good friend, Dr. Randy Olson, The Narrative Gym for Business. He came out with the Narrative Gym last year, which is more of a generic guide, 75-page guide on the ABT, written primarily for scientists and academia. I said, Randy, let's pull our brains together and let's do one specifically for business. We have that now out, the Narrative Gym for Business. You can get your copy at Amazon, be it print or Kindle. And of course, we would absolutely be delighted if you would leave us a rating and review. Mark, have you left us a rating and review yet for that book?
It is in the hopper, Park. It'll be coming over soon. It is a great book. I've read it multiple times, honestly. It's a reference guide. So I will be glad if I guarantee I'm not the first, but I'll add to the list.
I appreciate that.
You got it.
And I appreciate you all listening to this show. Come on back next Monday when we'll have another story artist right here for you like Mark. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening.